Can you hear me? I want to start this talk with a little bit of a personal note. In about 1971-72, my mother, Mickey Ingalls, dragged a very disaffected teenager to the Montgomery, Alabama Museum of Art, telling me that there was something I really had to see. And I said, oh yeah, I don't want to go, I'm not going. But she persisted, and we went, and it was James Hampton's throne. So in a curious quirk of life and fate, when I began working at the Smithsonian American Art Museum in 1988, this came under my care as an object conservator. Who knew? So this afternoon, I'm going to talk to you about the James Hampton Throne. I'll be discussing the discovery of the throne, a little bit about James Hampton's biography, the materials that the throne is made of, aluminum foil manufacture, the throne conditions and deterioration, conservation and maintenance, and a conclusion. So in 1964, James Hampton, a reclusive worker at the General Services Administration in Washington, died of stomach cancer. His rented garage lay unopened until the landlord decided to rent it out and opened it to find a trove of glittering silvery objects. Reluctant to dispose of the strange collection, the landlord contacted museums, local newspapers, and even the New York Times. Eventually, the National Collection of Fine Arts, now the Smithsonian American Art Museum, agreed to pay the past due rental fees for the garage and acquired in 1970 the indescribable hoard, later known to the world as the Throne of the Third Heaven Nations Millennium General Assembly, or simply the Hampton Throne. The silvery gleam was caused, of course, by reflections from the aluminum foil covering almost every surface. Its like had never been seen, and acting museum director Harry Lowe later said they didn't know what it was or what to call it, but they knew it was something special. And indeed, it was an ambitious scheme to create an ecclesiastical environment to serve as a staging for the second coming of Christ, as foretold in the Revelations book of the Bible. Here are some examples of Hampton's work. A schematic plan at the upper left of the slide shows the location of the items. So here you have what we generally refer to as just the small items. There are a lot of plaques, perhaps 15 or 20 plaques, and there are about 10 crowns. The medium-sized object, so-called, a star, an altar table plaque holder, and so you can, have a plaque of the day. So those come in and out and are held by something that looks suspiciously like a Kleenex box. Then there are the larger elements. I was really struck during today's lectures about the frequency of winged figures and angels, and Hampton used a lot of that type of imagery in his work, as you'll see. Here you have a butterfly stand and a center pulpit. So since it was an ecclesiastical space, obviously there has to be somewhere for the minister to stand and deliver the sermon. So this was the big central pulpit. So James Hampton, extensive research was conducted on the throne by Linda Hartigan, who worked as an intern, a registrar, and a curator at the National Collection of Fine Arts and the Smithsonian American Art Museum. And we're indebted to her for the background information that she unearthed and provided on Hampton. So the artist's early life, by all accounts, was unremarkable. He was born in Ellery, South Carolina in 1909. He moved to Washington, D.C. in 1931 at the age of 22. I think that must have been a very disruptive change for a country boy. And indeed, in 1931, he had his first vision. He had a series of visions, and he recorded them on cardboard tags, such as the one you see on the right side of the screen. This one hung from one of the throne's large stands named for the prophet Moses. After his arrival in Washington, he did a series of menial jobs, including being a short-order cook at a local eatery. But he was inducted into an Army Air Squadron during World War II, and he had a chance to travel quite a bit. He went to Texas, Seattle, Saipan, Honolulu, and Guam. And I've often wondered if those sort of Asiatic sites allowed him to see some of the glittery works of art made, particularly in places like Guam and Hong Kong. It must have been quite exotic for him. His only dated sculpture, and perhaps the first of the entire ensemble, is labeled Made on Guam, April 1945. And it's about 2 feet by 1 foot, maybe. He was honorably discharged from the Army in 1945, returned to D.C. after the war, and found work as a night janitor at the General Services Administration. In 1950, he rented a garage in the Shaw neighborhood of Washington and created his life's work there from 1950 to 1964. Anecdotal evidence suggests that after his late shift, the artist combed the streets for discarded materials on the way to his garage studio. There, he would continue working into the night on his project. According to those who knew him, he spoke of one day setting up a storefront ministry, no doubt incorporating his handmade objects into a spiritual environment to serve God. Here's a list of the artist's basic construction materials. Furniture, he would buy furniture at a used furniture store on 14th Street in Washington. Sometimes he would, for example, buy a round table, cut it in half, and then he would have 2 semicircular tables. He would buy dressers and pull the drawers out, invert them, and in that way, get more height for low pieces. Iron casters he probably got from office chairs at the GSA. Poster board, insulation board, cellulose acetate overlay film, desk blotter paper, craft construction paper, nails, brads, tax pens. So these are very humble materials, and he probably got just about all of them free. Here's an example of a repurposed chair that served as the throne. It's actually hard to see in the pictures of the overall throne because there's just so much, there's so many pieces around it. But indeed, this is normally shown at the back between the 2 tall butterfly stands. And this is being worked on, treated by 2 pre-programmed volunteers. Not quite sure where he got that cushion. I guess it's a couch cushion or something. Then, in addition to the basic materials that I just talked about, he added a lot of embellishments, things like inks and paints, dye-based marker, pen, pencil, light bulbs covered with foil, glass jars and vases covered with foil, electrical conduit covered with foil for use as rounded beading on the plain furniture to dress it up. And, did I say foil? Aluminum foil. So this is a picture of the conduit. Electrical conduit there, even a little bit of twine there. He was obviously trying to dress up this straight edge, and so he probably first used the twine, and then that didn't give it the roundness that he wanted, so he used the conduit. This is the kind of jar that I believe jams and jellies were sold in, and then you could keep the jar. So that's a bluebird one, and there's some other bird featured on those jars. So the sources of Hampton's decorative foils varied widely. Some came into use pristine, some following use as display materials in liquor stores or floral shops, or packaging for cigarettes or foodstuffs. Whether Hampton's compulsion for foils would have caused him to select food wrappings from the GSA office trash where he worked is conceivable but not documented. But if so, acidic foodstuffs or fatty residues could have made their way into the works, causing damage later on. According to Alcoa Aluminum Company publication from 1953, quote, "In general, food products are not corrosive to aluminum, but many hygroscopic products packaged in thin foil may cause some reaction, particularly if the product contains salt and some mild organic acid in the case of cheese or mayonnaise." The most important and dependable sources of Hampton's raw material, however, were rolls of household aluminum foil. And here you see a tab. This usage is signaled by telltale tabs remaining at the end of rolls, advising the buyer that there were only 6 feet left. Order now, Reynolds wrap. These warnings were incorporated by the artist into the foil wrappings and remained unseen at the back of some of the throne elements. And I sometimes picture him, I'm sure he had different working phases, but I sometimes picture him just working feverishly and not, just pulling out the foil, rolls and not having time to, even tear off the tab before he started a new one. Clean and shiny, the household foil provided a reliable raw material that the artist could spontaneously model and sculpt in pursuit of his artistic vision. Hampton's use of aluminum foil coincided with its increasing availability and affordability and packaging trends which favored the use of aluminum. Food packaging in the early 20th century shifted away from bulk to individual packaging. There was a demand for better sanitation, better display, storage, and inventory of consumer goods, better protection of product quality, positive identification of packaged foods, and there was pure food and drug legislation. The first industries to really take advantage of the use of aluminum foil for packaging were the tobacco, fancy box, and greeting card industries, and the confectionery industry, using plain and laminated foil for chewing gum and other confections. In 1911, the Swiss company Tobler began packaging its chocolates in foil, and then Lifesavers followed suit in the U.S. in 1913. In 1947, I was surprised by this late date. Reynolds wrap number 80, alloy number 8079 became available to consumers, just in 47. Hampton started work 3 years later in 1950, and in 1980, the alloy was changed to number 8111. This is less important to us, but apparently to connoisseurs of aluminum, this is very important. So I'm just going to very quickly run you through the production of aluminum, just because it's so critical to perception of this artifact, this group of artifacts. So foil production begins with billets or ingots of bulk aluminum metal. They're rolled and re-rolled to a thin gauge on cold rolls using lubrication. Foil is generally defined by U.S. manufacturers as having a thickness of between 6 mils and 0.25 mils, or thousandths of an inch. Kitchen foil today is usually less than 1 mil thick. The rolled foil intended for industrial applications is work-hardened, but the household product is heated to anneal it prior to final inspection. This produces foil in the full soft condition, able to dead fold, and that means stay where it's put without springing back or cracking. This annealing also burns off any oil lubricants used in the rolling process. The purity of most packaging foil is about 99.35 to 99.55% aluminum, with minute parts of other elements such as silicon and iron to strengthen and harden the aluminum. And this very high level of purity suggests that aluminum foil deterioration is due primarily not to the foil itself, but to the laminates, adhesives, and coatings used in the production of varied consumer products, as well as the conditions of its usage. Paper laminates are used in the industry to reinforce thin foils, allowing the use of less metal, thereby reducing costs while maintaining moisture impermeability imparted by even the thinnest metal films. The foil may be laminated to a carrier or backing sheet with all kinds of adhesives. The actual paper and foil laminating adhesives for Hampton's foils are unknown, but one paper backing did test positive for polyvinyl acetate resin, possibly originally intended for heat sealing applications. Foils used in the fabrication of the Hampton Throne appear to be of 4 general types: out-of-the-box Reynolds household foil, used and new, textured foils, which were mainly silver-colored, as seen in the image on the right, silver foil and paper laminates, and paper laminated foils with gold-toned coatings. So the bulk of the throne has a silver coloration, but there are some really strategically placed, gold-toned foils that really enhance the depth and the sense of richness of the entire ensemble. And you can see the textured roll there. I can't help but think that looks a lot like the Washington Monument, that textured piece there. Thin foils, whose carrier or laminate deteriorates, have little physical supports. I'm sure we've all experienced this when trying to tear into some Christmas candy, and become vulnerable to mechanical wear, tearing, and loss, such as that seen in frequently handled areas of the throne. See those? That's the paper backing, and the foil's been torn away or has come away. Coatings are applied to plain or laminated foil products to provide additional gloss to the surface, or, as in Hampton's gold foils, to alter the color of the aluminum metal for decorative purposes. Analysis of gold foil samples from the throne revealed that cellulose nitrate was the toned coating used. In these 3 combined spectra of cellulose nitrate, the throne foil sample is in red, a degraded known sample of cellulose nitrate is in purple, and those lines are pretty close, and an undegraded but still cellulose, nitrocellulose standard is seen in the aqua-colored spectrum. So it's the same material, but it's not old. The causes of deterioration. Hampton's artistic methods didn't utilize traditional carpentry techniques. In most cases, his structural attachments were made with insubstantial items such as thick cardboard straps, tinned iron tabs from adhesive tape rolls, or canned goods, and thin iron brads, which sometimes did not penetrate all the intended layers. An early inventory of the throne component materials in American Arts Conservation Files from July 1974 listed no screws used by the artists to aid in structural stability. A few screws were added by museum staff in 1974 to secure the taller pieces to withstand travel and loan. The structural material Hampton most relied upon, however, is hide glue, found on 4 detached throne samples and identified by FTIR analysis by comparison with the spectrum of a known sample of degraded hide glue. He may have discovered the utility of this material in discussion with the used furniture purveyors he's known to have frequented in the used furniture district. This material would have been inexpensive and readily available in bulk to be mixed up in individual batches as needed. The strength of this adhesive served Hampton well to some degree, securing layered papers and foils to wooden substrates and to other decorative layers. However, its contractile forces also worked to the artist's disadvantage because glue applied to paper-backed foils caused the shiny surfaces to shrivel and distort, resulting in a withered appearance. Balls with curved foil tabs are torn away here. Let me see if I can. So So Hampton's method for creating, I know this is a complicated image and it's probably a little hard for you to decipher, but there's basically a cross piece there covered with a top layer of silver foil, and then Hampton would wad up the foil balls and kind of smash them down in his thumb to create sort of a hemisphere, and then he would just put them on surfaces, and then he would cover that rounded surface with gold foil. And as you know, it's hard to get a flat sheet to conform to a rounded sheet, so he would kerf the edges and glue them down. And he must have used, hide glue to stick them down, and they just shriveled up and became very brittle and tore off. So this is just one example of how the use of hide glue caused some loss. So this tendency to shrinkage would have been exacerbated by the extremes of temperature and humidity endemic to the artist's workspace. In addition, aluminum's corrosion resistant in the presence of neutral glues, but acid or alkaline glues can cause some pitting. Moreover, a sticky black material referred to by an early conservator as tar, as well as several brown-toned house paints, caused distortion and staining of some paper elements and attracted dirt. Here you see, so this is a tarry substance. You see a lot of staining on the paper, and here's some tar with some sand, a house paint with some sand embedded in it. It was just, in general, kind of a difficult material to work with. These experimental materials would sometimes necessitate redoing by covering with foil or with additional foil-covered cardboard layers. This is particularly evident in some of the small early plaques. So here's one of the plaques, and again we have this tarry substance here around the border. This is an archival photo. It's a little hard to see the detail, but these little aluminum tabs have been degraded either by hide glue or by the tar that they sit in. So Hampton said no problem. He just superimposed another layer. And you can actually probably see little residual tab forms there that were covered over when he just made an additional, just made an addition. It's suspected that these materials were used early on in the artist's process and abandoned. Hampton made continual adjustments to find workable methods and materials, like all of the artists that we've been discussing today. And he made changes based on years-long experience with the inherent vice of his chosen materials. I don't need to tell anybody in this room that the storage environment of these large installations is never very good. The unheated garage Hampton rented at 7th Street in Washington between M and N Street, shown in this picture featuring the artist, was sparsely furnished, lit with raw light bulbs, which I think you can see there, and accessed by large carriage house double doors. Hampton died in 1964, and the National Collection of Fine Arts, or SAM, acquired the entire work in 1970. So components were housed for an extended time in the garage during fabrication and after the artist's death, and they would have encountered many of the agents of deterioration: unstable climate, including wide extremes of temperature and relative humidity and light, UV and visible. If, as seems likely, the uninhabited building envelope was not sealed, street dust, insects, rodents, and other agents of deterioration could have negatively impacted the materials of the throne. No insect damage has been observed on the throne elements, surprisingly, but some paper components show significant water staining and tide lines. Use of cheap construction papers colored with fugitive dyes led to fading early on of colored elements of many throne components. And in fact, when the throne was first acquired, there was some delamination of some of the winged figures, layered winged figures, and some of the staff people noticed that underneath some of the layers of the winged figures, there were these bright colors. There were roses and purples and greens, and already at that time, these materials, not having been chosen for their durability, had faded. So it was originally, as the artist conceived it, a much more colorful ensemble. After discovery of the throne's existence following Hampton's death, human factors such as handling, packing, storage, travel, and display would intervene to stress the fragile constructions further. The ensemble was first displayed publicly in 1971 in the National Collection of Fine Arts exhibition, Hidden Aspects. After extensive structural repairs, a portion of the throne complex, roughly 50 of 180 components, traveled, packaged in cardboard boxes and crates to 8 venues. I won't list them, but they include Abbey Aldrich Rockefeller, the Whitney Fine Arts in Boston, Montgomery Museum of Fine Arts. Parts have been loaned since 1982 to at least 10 museums. Major Complex was last loaned to Colonial Williamsburg in 2000. So it's been around the block a few times. And the throne has moved at least 4 times within the museum. So all that handling and shuttling around cannot have benefited these very fragile constructions. The deterioration of the foil, although in general the silver-colored household foils survived well, the artist appears to have been discontented with dust and dirt embedded in the interstices because he took steps to stop the alteration of the shiny surfaces by covering some with plastic overlay film and some with new household foil right out of the box. In time, as he covered over the dulled surfaces, the relief details lost their crispness and complexity. Other reasons for covering the existing foils may have been corrosion stimulated by tars and paints, as I've already referred to. Structural weaknesses caused by repeated folding and manipulation during construction could render the foils vulnerable to corrosion, and acidic food residues could have attacked weak areas of the foil. We did see some filiform corrosion. This is a treat for all you conservators out there. Can't ever have enough pictures of filiform corrosion. Appearing like mold tunnels on the surface of the metal was observed on a few silver-colored samples. Many of the paper laminated sheets have not held up well either, some due to mechanical stresses associated with handling while moving the rusty wheel components. The poor environment would have played an important role in furthering delamination, weakening the paper supports of the thin foils, and furthering their tendency to tear with pressure. Foil with gold-toned coatings has perhaps fared the worst because of sensitivity of the cellulose nitrate coatings to dust, light, and abrasion. So that's a deteriorated gold-toned coating. Furthermore, cellulose nitrate's listed by the Aluminum Association as one of the materials slightly corrosive to aluminum in certain solvents. Maintenance and treatment of the throne over the decades since its acquisition in 1970 has been challenging due to the sheer scale of the installation, the nearly constant display of the iconic ensemble, and difficult access due to the close packing of the elements when on display. Traveling exhibitions have involved multiple campaigns of intensive handling and light exposure. Beginning in 1988 with the hiring of a full-time objects conservator at the American Art Museum, regular maintenance was begun with a program of dusting. In-depth cleaning and repair campaigns occurred periodically in 1992, 2002, and 2012. Various dust preventive concepts have been considered over time. Dust is a really big problem with this. Let's see. One of the concepts for preventing dust was constructing a plexiglass barrier to protect the throne from dust and visitor interaction, which was a practice observed in historic rooms during the 1970s and 80s. Prior to the reopening of the renovated POB, renamed the Donald Williams Center, a positive pressure system was conceived to prevent dust from entering the throne enclosure and depositing on the foil elements, but financing did not materialize for this engineered solution. Display in a carpeted gallery exacerbates the common problem of dust influx into the gallery exhibition spaces. Let's see. In order to reduce light-induced deterioration, advances in museum lighting have also been considered and implemented. One of the advances that was considered was a motion detector calibrated to respond to human presence in the throne gallery, but a dark gallery waiting to be motion activated was deemed uninviting to visitors and was not implemented. LED lighting, laser emitting diode lighting, is being utilized to augment incandescent light sources in an effort to save energy and reduce the need for access to bulbs in areas with difficult access. In conclusion, in spite of poor quality materials, experimental methods, non-standard joinery, constant revision by the artist, poor storage, frequent loans, and long-term display, the throne has endured from its inception in a garage workshop in 1950 until the present. The artist was a poor man and could only use what he could scavenge or purchase secondhand, with the exception of one material: abundantly available, high quality, yet inexpensive household aluminum foil, whose inherent stability under deleterious conditions is perhaps the element most responsible for preserving the spiritual and artistic vision of James Hampton. I encourage you to visit the throne in Washington, D.C., currently on view in the American Art Museum first floor folk art galleries. And I'd like to thank the following people for their help with this paper. Thank you for your attention.